All right, we're still looking at the integrity of the evolutionists, geologists who have proposed certain dates for the age of the Earth in various rock strata all around the world, which is totally inconsistent and based support based on radiometric dating and so on. So we're working on the conclusions of radioactive dating methods from this file here, PabloStudyManuals.net, K59.htm, and we're looking at scriptural testimony of grown creation attest to all matter present at the time, at the beginning, of parent and children elements. The Bible quite plainly and irrefutably teaches the fact of a grown creation, one with an apparent age of some sort, analogous to the apparent age of a mature Adam at the first instant of his existence, his creation. The uniqueness of Adam and Eve's creation is emphasized in the New Testament, for Adam was formed, then Eve. For the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man. Similarly, most of the biblical miracles stress true creative activity in which the time factor is immensely compressed. For example, the transformation of water into wine, John 2:10. Creation of apparent age, in other words. This creation must have included all the chemical elements already organized in all the organic and inorganic chemical compounds and mixtures necessary to support the processes of the earth and of life on the earth. These processes include the phenomena of radioactivity. It is perhaps possible, but not biblical, that only the parent elements of radioactivity decay chains were originally created. But it is eminently more harmonious with the whole concept of a complete biblical creation to say that all the elements of the chain were also created simultaneously, most likely in a state of radioactive equilibrium. All the parent, adult, child elements. This means that with each mineral containing a radioactive element, there were also, at the original creation, all of the daughter elements in the decay series, including some of the final stable end products, like lead. Such a concept is undoubtedly shocking to the mind of a consistent uniformitarian, but there is nothing impossible or unreasonable about it. In fact, short of denying the existence of any creator or original creation at all, one must logically come to some place in the long chain of secondary causes where something was created. If so, then there was a creator. That something at the instant of its creation must have had an appearance of age. And the only way we could then determine its true age would be through divine revelation, because you weren't there. An apparent age might, of course, be deduced from that something on the basis of any processes of change which were observed in connection with it. But this would not be the true age. When did that start, that process? You weren't there. And this is exactly the situation we find in connection with these radioactive elements and with many other geochronometers. It is eminently reasonable and consistent with the basically efficient and beneficent character of God, as well as his revelation concerning the fact that he would have created the entire universe as a complete operational functioning mechanism. The grossly cruel and wasteful process of an almost indeterminable, wearisomely protracted evolution leading up to man's arrival as its goal is, as usually envisioned by uniformitarians, or at least by theistic uniformitarians, are on the other hand utterly inconsistent with the character and wisdom of God. It is therefore not ridiculous after all, but perfectly reasonable to suppose that the radiogenic elements, like all other elements, were created directly by God. The obvious question then arises as to whether the apparent ages of the minerals so created, as indicated by the relative amounts of parent and daughter elements contained therein, would all be diverse from each other, or whether they would all exhibit some consistent value, and if the latter, what value of apparent age might be implied. In the absence of specific revelation, it seems impossible to decide this question with finality. However, it is more satisfying teleologically, that is to explain everything from a design rather than from an evolved standpoint, and therefore more reasonable to infer that all these primeval clocks, since they were wound up at the same time at creation, were also set to read the same time. Whatever the setting was, we may call it the apparent age of the earth, but the true age of the earth can only be known by means of divine revelation, which today is limited to the Bible. We conclude, therefore, that a time measurement based on the principle of radioactive decay is in itself quite inconclusive. It is in the first place quite reasonable to believe that both parent and daughter elements in each radioactive chain were created at the beginning, probably in equilibrium amounts, lead with uranium. The amount of originally created radiogenic end product in each chain is uncertain. It is likely, however, that homologous amounts were created in all such minerals so that all such elements would, when created, give an appearance of the same degree of maturity or of age. Furthermore, the intense environmental radiation present in the upper atmosphere could well have resulted in much higher decay rates for the radioactive elements at one or more times in the past. Nothing was uniform. There's more evidence of a catastrophic worldwide flood and a single ice age derived therefrom than there is of evolution. Thus, by the end of the creation period, each radioactive mineral would very likely contain a sizable amount of its radiogenic daughter, thus skewing the events, though actually but a few days old. Again, at the time of the deluge, it seems reasonable that the increased radioactivity in the environment would have speeded up all decay processes by some unknown amount. Therefore, even in the relatively rare cases where the radioactive mineral was not disturbed excessively during the intense geologic upheavals of the creation and deluge periods, the relative amounts of parent and daughter elements would still be entirely incapable of yielding a valid record of true age, since neither the original amount of radiogenic material nor the changes in past decay rates can now be determined, because you weren't there. How much lead is parent original lead, and how much lead is child lead or daughter lead from the radioactive uranium. The only thing reasonably certain is that the present decay rate and present amount of daughter element, if applied in the uniformitarian computation, must result in an age estimate immensely too great. Even if you don't accept the Bible as valid, it's still much too great. Let's look at pleochoric halos support creation in the flood, not evolution. It is said someone may object that it has been proved that the disintegration rate of uranium has never changed during past geologic time, since the size of the so-called pleochoric halos is the same in strata of all ages. These halos are spherical zones of discoloration produced in rocks around radioactive nuclei by the ionizing powers of the alpha particles emitted from the nucleus. This happening inside of a rock. The distance to which these particles can penetrate before they are stopped depends on their energy of emission, and this in turn is believed to control the normal rate of decay, high rates corresponding to larger ranges. The range of the alpha particles depends, however, not only on the decay rate of the radioactive nucleus, but also upon the nature of the material in which it is enclosed, obviously. The denser the material, the shorter the range. For this reason, this particular argument is usually limited only to the halos surrounding nuclei of uranium or thorium in a matrix of mica. The argument goes that for this type of halo, the radius is always the same, and therefore that the disintegration rate must always have been the same. In view of observations made by very careful scientists, it appears that the oft reiterated claim about the constancy of the radius may be invalid. Therefore, there remains no actual evidence that the decay rates may not have been different at some time or times in the past than they are at present. The extent of the halos around the inclusions, foreign radioactive minerals within rock, varies over a wide range, even within the same nuclear material in the same matrix, but all sizes fall into definite groups. My measurements are in microns 5, 7, 10, 17, 20, 23, 27, and 33. Jolie's figures correspond with these, except he does not include the smaller sizes and does include 39, 38 to 40, which I have not run across. Halos sometimes show 2 or even 3 definite rings or zones, indicating the presence of more than one radioactive element, each with its own specific alpha ray path. Roy Allen, American Scientific Affiliation, published scientist. According to our hypothesis, all rocks are of essentially the same age, so that the fact that pleochoric halos have about the same radius in all of them is exactly what would be expected. They were all formed at about the same time, therefore the same decay rates, whether constant or changing, have continually occurred in all of them. Furthermore, it seems that unlikely that even a substantial increase in the decay rate would cause any measurable change in the halo radius. The latter is determined mainly by the extremely short-lived elements in the decay chain, for those have the longer ranges. It does not necessarily seem necessary to conclude that an acceleration of the first stage of the decay process, the expulsion of helium atoms from the uranium nucleus, would thereby accelerate all other stages in the chain individually. But even if it did, the increase in alpha particle range corresponding to increase in expulsion energies become vanishingly small as the energies increase, and this factor would prevent any very substantial increase in the radius. We conclude that a statistical constancy of the halo radii in rocks of various ages proves nothing about the decay rates. There you go. Finding something that isn't there. Meteorite activity, radioactivity, refutes concept of an old universe. It is interesting that radioactivity age calculations made on meteorites are similarly very contradictory. By examining the helium content of several meteorites, Paineth arrives at ages ranging from 60 million to 7 billion years, big range. Re-examining the evidence, Bauer arrives at a common age of about 60 million years for the meteorites and also for the age of the universe. Interesting. D. Haar. It has been difficult for astronomers and geologists to accept such a small age for the meteorites in terms of any of the classical theories of the origin of the solar system. More recent and much more subtle calculations have been invoked to reconcile this discrepancy. You're looking for stuff to prove your case. Throw out the rest. When that is done, the age of stony meteorites, some solidification is found. The result is about 4.6 thousand million years. Thus, merely by changing the method of calculation, one can increase the age of a meteorite from 60 to 4,600 million years. Wow. Magic. Yeah, that's not science, that's prestidigitation. The latter calculation was made by the potassium-argon method, the first by the helium isotope method, both methods of which are not substantiated as reliable in the first place. Okay, we can continue this next time. We'll look into how reliable is the amount of meteoritic dust. And apparently it points to a young Earth, as everything else has done so far.